Hey there, and welcome to the Build Me a Brewery podcast. My name is Chris Hayton, and this is part 2 of the brewery equipment sourcing segment. In this episode, I chat with John Gonzales from Bespoke Brewing Solutions. Now, John, originally from Austin, Texas, and back in 2007 at the age of 24, John relocated to China within the IT and logistics space. During this time, he found himself occasionally supplying stainless steel growlers and soon began building some good connections with people within the brewing industry. In 2014, John started Bespoke Brewing Solutions along with other experienced industry professionals, and for the past 6 years now, they've been designing breweries and installing equipment all over the world with a good solid list of clients now here in Australia. Just like Neil from Asian Beer Network in part 1 of this segment, John offers some cracking information on what to be thinking about when setting up your brewery and the important considerations when picking the shiny bits of stainless to start brewing on. Having a good repertoire of clients here in Australia, John offers some great insights about the current and future outlook of the craft beer industry here in Australia. I'll leave you to it then. I hope you enjoy my chat with John Gonzales from Bespoke Brewing Solutions. Welcome, John, to the Build Me a Brewery podcast. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate your time, and thanks for inviting me.
Like I was explaining into the audience in our intro, this is forming part of our equipment sourcing segment. There's probably going to be some overlapping information that other guests have shared. Like we had Neil from Asian Beer Network on, and you know Neil quite well from what you were telling me as well.
For sure. Yeah. He's a good dude.
And I guess I just want to get different opinions from those in the industry, specifically around equipment supply and sourcing. I know that you've got a lot more experience than that. You're involved in brewery layouts and installations and consulting. So I'm sure we'll be sharing that sort of information with our audience as well. But always want to get to know the guests first off. Tell us a bit about how you got to where you are in the industry now, and maybe a bit about your craft beer roots or your home brewer to begin with. If you want to sort of take it from there, mate, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll just start off back where I'm originally from. So originally from Austin, Texas, and what got me, I guess, in the road to craft is back in the day when I finished school, I had the opportunity to come out to Asia back in 2007. That was doing IT and logistics. From there, basically 3-week project in China. By the time I was done, they offered me a relocation package to go to Hong Kong. So 24 years old, sold my futon, packed my bags, and from there went into trading and sourcing after my IT days. And during the trading and sourcing days within China, we started doing stainless steel growlers in my previous company. So from that was kind of the foot in the door into the industry, and it just kind of grew from there. I made some great connections with some great people in the industry, had some great ideas, and basically that's where I got started in just doing equipment, basically.
Okay. Home brewing days, was there ever a kit and a kilo brewing in the garage or backyard at all?
No, sir, not really. I was kind of more on the IT end. Drank a lot of beer.
Yeah.
Started off with the macro beer. Did a little bit of craft in my college days. The fat tires back in the day.
Yeah.
And then when I got over here and obviously started getting into the industry more, then my appreciation for craft really started to blossom.
Yeah, it's surprising how many people that who are in the industry have IT backgrounds, actually. I can't remember who I was talking to. It might have been Pete from Wayward, but talking about how people are very analytical or very technical based and maybe project manager based. They do quite well, especially in the early days of setting up a brewery. It's interesting to see and hear that. And I always thought homebrewing was the gateway towards getting into the industry, and surely it still is, but it's seems like there's a lot of people that start out that become or have a very good stature in the industry that never homebrewed in their entire life and are experts in the field. Like I know Neil Cameron's one of them, and yourself, but I consider myself a bit of a backyard brewer, and that's why I'm interested in it. But it's good to see how people find themselves getting in the industry, different walks of life. And we were talking off air a bit about favourite beers and breweries? I know you've got a lot of customers over here in Australia, that a lot of breweries that you've helped build their breweries and expand and all that. We were actually only just talking about Colonial down in Melbourne, who you guys have helped. I'm actually drinking their pale ale at the moment, and like I was saying, it's one of my favourite beers of the year so far. So those guys are doing some absolutely brilliant stuff.
Yes, they are. They're growing quickly, and it's amazing, as you were saying, that not just one of their beers is very good, and it's the upper echelon in my opinion, but they're just solid throughout. And then you were talking IT, and from my opinion, it would be that with beer and in brewing, you're trying to keep it consistent, and that can be the trials and tribulations of getting that consistency. Using the different equipment and your processes. It's a tough thing to do. So hats off to Colonial for doing that.
Moving into, I guess, the bread and butter of our chat, I really want to get your insights about what it means for someone to start the process of sourcing their own equipment. So, they've found their location, they've come up with a concept of what they want to be in terms of a brewery. There's many different models. We've talked about brew pub models, maybe a regional brewery with a tap room, like a production and tap room, or just a pure out production level. And so I guess I want to sort of hear your thoughts of those important considerations on what an aspiring brewery owner needs to make. Maybe if you want to just give the audience a snapshot of the services that you offer as Bespoke Brewing Solutions.
Okay. So here at Bespoke, what we try to pride ourselves on is being custom brewing equipment designers, manufacturers, consultants, and as of pre-COVID, installers, depending on the location and where we could get to. That goes from production breweries to brew pubs to small advanced homebrew kits. Back in the day, we've kind of gone away from that. But that whole process of setting up, we've become pretty attuned to what to look for, especially in the Australian market now that we have a number of breweries there, and what clients need to consider, and kind of give them a little bit of a understanding of this is where we recommend you start, and get a understanding of, which will then put everything kind of in line from there.
Right. Are you able to mention some of, I know we talked about Colonial as one of your customers. Are you able to tell us a bit about, I guess, some specific breweries that you've helped with their installations or consulting work?
Well, lately, I guess, as far as complete install, the most intricate one we've done is Urban Alley Brewery in the Docklands in Melbourne. Deepwater is one of the breweries we put into New South Wales on the Queensland border. And that was a great project, great family. Basically, they installed their brewery in their shed or barn, if you will. It's kind of a rural area. We have Sunday Road in Sydney. Lately, we've supplied a brew kit to Little Bang in Adelaide. So as far as kit goes, we're starting to get more of a footprint there for sure, and always learning through each installation. And as far as tanks goes, we work with Capital, Colonial, as you said, Bespoke. We've worked with Farrell in the past. 2 Bays just now in Melbourne. So those would be probably the big ones, mate. Matilda Bay. So we have worked with the CUB as well, with their Hillsville location. So we've been lucky enough to work with some really high caliber clients and some smaller clients as well. So we've tried to, really run the gamut on what we've done, especially in Australia. But we also supply equipment. I think we're in 15 different countries now, if I remember correctly, with our latest being a full turnkey installation in Bangalore, India. That was an adventure. And that was for Anheuser-Busch, ZX Ventures. So that was in a 5-star hotel, the Taj MG Road in Bangalore. It turned out really well. Unfortunately, COVID kind of put a delay on it, but they are now open, and it seems like they're smashing it.
I'm hearing a bit of stuff in India, actually. Like something that just doesn't come to mind, that there's a craft beer market there, but I'm sure there is. It seems to be going crazy.
insane.
Wow.
It was really amazing to go to Bangalore. I believe they have, don't quote me on this, well, you are quoting me, but 60 some odd brew pubs. And mate, their biggest one was probably 1,000 square meters. And that's obviously they have the brew pub and it's just sprawling, beautiful area. I guess the atmosphere there is it's a very happening industry in India. And I think it's going to continue to grow.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I know Australia is sort of starting to hit its strides, and
Sure.
sort of the US market has sort of led the way. But Neil was on earlier, and he was saying, how Chinese market is going crazy for it as well, and so it's really good to see that actually a lot of different product offerings in the beer space. So, which is what has been lacking definitely over in Australia for a number of years, but we're starting to see. Those big boys being pushed out for the tap space now. And we're starting to see our local breweries on there or beloved breweries, national ones, on just your locals, which is really good to see.
100%. I agree with that.
On the equipment side, you guys don't actually manufacture it yourselves, but you've got, I guess, an arrangement with some suppliers or a supplier in China. Is that right?
These two hands, mate. I'm just joking. We do, we work with what we call OEM manufacturing. So we have suppliers that we've worked with for years in China that make our kits to our design. And we ship them and obviously we design, manufacture with them, very hands-on with them. We've learned over the years how to work with each supplier, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and trying to, obviously practice continuous improvement from both ends. Yeah. And we have learned a lot over the years. I'm happy to say that our equipment manufacturer, we've used the same one since day one. And just really tried to grow with them. They push us, we push them a lot, obviously. But it's been a great relationship with all of our suppliers.
Yeah, good. You mentioned about a couple suppliers there, but will you use a certain supplier for, say, the tanks and a certain supplier for your brew houses, or is it sort of a mix of everything?
Great question. All of our stainless, all our, let's say, brewing equipment, tanks, vessels, brew houses, that comes from one supplier. Okay. And then, keg washer, maybe filter housings, packaging. We do a little bit of packaging into Hong Kong. We'll find different suppliers, obviously, to fulfill those needs.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And we were speaking in other episodes with some other people in this space a bit about some of the important things aspiring brewery owners need to focus on when they're at that stage of sourcing equipment. Sorry, mate. My 3-week-old son's going crazy right now. So
oh, mate, congratulations. I was going to ask you, I don't know if you were a dad or not.
Yes. He's going great. Thank you. Little Spencer, his name is.
Awesome. So, I can see a little black. I think you got a little, you're tired.
That's what broken sleep does to you, mate.
Right.
Yeah, everyone told me about it. I didn't believe them. So, but he's bloody rooms next door, and he must be going for a bloody diaper change right now, so I can hear him going off. So
that's mate.
No, thank you, mate. Thank you. Yeah, I forgot I mentioned that to you on our little chat actually beforehand. So, all right, well, I'll start that again. I don't know, maybe I'll piece that in somewhere, but
please do.
I guess what I'd like to share with the audience is what aspiring brewery owners need to be considering when they're at that equipment sourcing stage, because I've mentioned it a couple times already in this podcast series. It was actually Neil Cameron that set me on the right path, because I didn't have a location. I didn't know what sort of brewery I wanted to be. And I started looking at the equipment side straight away. I think a lot of people get the impression that the equipment is going to be the thing that costs them the most. And yes, it is probably going to be a large chunk, but a lot of people, and myself included, just see a price tag on a quote and think, well, that's how much that brew house is going to cost me. But they don't realize, well, freight, trades, installation, it just keeps going. But you can't tailor a quote from an equipment supplier, or they can't really get a good gauge of what sort of your needs are until you actually have probably a location, and until you know what volume per month you want to be producing in terms of beer. And so I guess maybe run through some of these things that people need to have mapped out already before talking about equipment?
That's a great question. And Neil, hats off to him, because that's sound advice. When I usually prepare, let's say a Zoom call with a client that's I've quoted to, and I want to kind of take them through the quote and got to feel where they're at. My big three things to look at, in my opinion, are how much beer you have to make, how much budget do you have and money to spend, and what's your location like? Because those three are critical gate checks on each other. They're all very intertwined. So if you want to make 1 million liters a year, but you have a $500,000 budget, let's say, for everything, and it's let's say, brew pub and not just a production brewery, and you only have 300 square meters for everything, there's a lot of checks and balances within those three, I guess, figures that you need to go in and figure out. You need to calculate. So what I recommend to clients is look at your budget, look what you're trying to do, and then where are you going to go? And so Neil hit that nail on the head, because if you can't put it in the building or you can't afford it, again, you're not going to be able to do it. So you got to go approach your equipment sourcing with those three things in mind. But if one is lacking, you can still go ahead, but you have to realize that you might not find the perfect location. You have the money and you have the brew house already picked out, but if your location is not going to support it, not just from a size-wise standpoint, but utilities as well. I don't have gas. I only have electricity. I want to put steam in. Oh, your boiler for a 20 hex system, an electric boiler is going to it's going to be a bit pricey. Yeah. So those things, again, are all intertwined. And those are the three things I would say to start at first. Yeah. And especially in Australia, because depending on what you're doing, where you go, you're going to hit a lot of hurdles, it seems to me, in my opinion, with, local council and understanding what works as far as the zoning. And when you submit your DA, and I might be throwing out terms that are incorrect here, but
you're spot on there, mate, so far.
That's critical, and that takes a while, and just going through those checks and balances. But you're right about equipment. It's not just buying the equipment. You just don't see 150,000 or 100,000 and say, yep, that's it. There's shipping, there's unloading, there's the GST you have to pay. There's the installation of all the utilities. So, water, glycol, steam, if you have a steam system, gas, compressed air, whatever it may be, which starts to add up.
Yeah, and they just seem things that you just don't know until you either talk to people like yourself or other brewery owners who've been through it, and definitely things that I didn't consider in the piece, and will actually start forming part of my budget and business plan when I do eventually start acting on all the information I've put together so far. So I asked Neil from Asian Beer Network this question, but talk to us a bit about what is a core list or solid list of some of the equipment that you would typically find in a brewery. I know that depends on what system you're going with, and if it's 2, 3, or 4 vessel systems. But talk us through some of those things that people should be having as a minimum when starting their brewery.
For sure. Well, it's funny you say that, because I have what I call standard turnkey equipment quotes kind of set up in our background, where I send to clients that basically take it from grain handling all the way to kegs and keg packaging. I don't do canning or bottling lines. That's a little bit out of my realm at this stage, but we definitely have connections to companies that can do that. So starting off, you want to look at your grain handling, your milling, your augering, different ways of actually delivering the grain or grist to the system. Are you just dumping it in? You go in through a grist case, your brew house, your liquor tanks, all your peripherals that go into the brew house. So your platform, your heat exchange, controls, the pumps, manual, semi-automatic. Then from there, once you leave the heat exchange, you have your liquor tanks, then you're in your cellar. So your FBs, your bright tanks, your glycol system, control system, and your chiller. Once you're in the tanks, then you need all your hoses and all your componentry, your sight glasses, your T-pieces, your butterfly valves that you're going to be using for CIP, for beer transferring, and then getting on to kegs and keg washing, keg filling, packaging lines, and all the utilities that go with that, steam boiler, if you're going down that route. Or your burner if you're going down the direct fire route. So there are a lot of things to think about, as well as, once the beer's out and in package, or you need to do testing, all your lab equipment as well. What are you going to need? Are you going to need flow meters for excise? Do you need to have that and be able to have that traceability to satisfy your local regulations, whatever those might be, or wherever you are?
Yeah, I've had a couple of people on, I think Pete from Wayward mentioned about it, that you could spend upwards of 10 to 20 grand just on a thing that measures the amount of water that comes through your system or through your brewery. And it's nothing to do with making your beer better. It's just to satisfy a bloody bureaucrat. You're producing a lot of water, and, local water authorities want to know, and they're starting to get a little bit more clued on about craft breweries over here in Australia. So they're starting to, I guess, pick on them a little bit more and ask questions. So, yeah, these are just things that people just don't think about. They just think, especially if you're a backyard brewer, you just see, your 3-vessel and, a fermenter and maybe an ink bird to control your fridge and away you go. But you just don't look at all the back end side and all the things that bring a commercial equipment to a location like your brewery, and there's all these added costs. Speaking of costs, I know I'm not expecting you to just say, hey, this is how much this costs or all that, but Neil Cameron mentioned about what the sweet spot over here was, and he's talking about brew pubs, and I think maybe you mentioned like 500 litre systems. What are you finding is the sweet spot in Australia, or even if you want to comment about other markets like, in America or Europe or Asia, but what is the sweet spot for what most people are coming to you and saying, listen, I'm looking at putting this is the size I'm going with, and this is the model I'm going with. What are you seeing as a trend out there?
Great question. And I'll say it from two ends because I think it's matching up what I would do personally if I was going to open a brewery. I'll talk about that, which kind of matches up what I'm seeing from clients.
Yep.
So personally, if I was going to open up a brewery, I'd probably go in the 5 hec to 10, 12 hec range. I'd probably do a brew pub. So on premise, it's no secret that when you sell on premise, that's where the good margins are.
Yep.
No. But you also, in my opinion, you want to leave enough volume there for growth, and you also want to leave volume there for any volume that you have, package it. Even if you're running mobile canning, and I don't know the numbers on mobile canning, but let's say you're not making the margins that you really want to be. I do feel that having that ability to self-distribute or to do takeaways, especially if you're producing good beer, that's free marketing.
Yeah.
So I really do feel that is the sweet spot. So I think Neil's correct. That 500 or 600 liter, 5 to 6 hec, all the way up to 10 to 12 hec. And then just planning your growth from there. Now, whether that's just cellar size, whether you want to plan a brew house upgrade or add another vessel to increase your output, you can plan that in different stages. We're not building for day one or year one. We want to know what year 2 and year 3 is projected to be, because you want to plan, especially on your layout. You want to plan for year 3. You want to plan your utilities if you can, instead of getting a 10 horsepower chiller, maybe get the 15, because you're paying an extra $2,000 now instead of paying an extra $15,000 down the road, and trying to on-sell your 10 horse, if that makes sense.
No, and there's some takeaways I'm taking away already is, because a lot of people are going to be limited by their budget. Not everyone are going to be, this capital-backed brewery with all these investors behind them to go straight production brewery. A lot of the people listening are, in my opinion, are most likely people wanting to go down this route, that brew pub, maybe micro, nano size, and then build from there. I know Neil Cameron mentioned if you go anything below, like say a 300 litre system or 500 litre system, he calls it a commercial nightmare to be honest. He just thinks it just depends on what you want to do. If you just want to serve your local community, and that's fine, you know what I mean, have a food offering and all that. But and Pete from Wayward says that there's a space between being a brew pub and a production brewery, and in between is no man's land.
Well
That's
said.
how he put it. So if you find yourself in that no man's land, then you're just eating into margins. There's no economies of scale for you, and probably going to go out of business in a couple of years. So it's just figuring out early what you want to do is what I'm taking from it. Yeah.
Agreed. And one thing I'll add as well is I definitely see that you don't hear a lot of brewers say, "Oh, I went too big." There's a lot, well, at least to now, I went too small.
Well, funny you say that, John. Actually, I had the Rocks guys on here, and they said the exact same thing, and I was blown away by it as well. Simon Osborne, I don't know if you've had any dealings with the Rocks guys, but lovely guys that made me feel really welcome. But one thing the managing director, Simon Osborne, said is that they started too big too early, and they leveraged themselves too much, and they're only starting to see themselves come out of that. And they've turned that ship around, as what Simon would describe. And, you know, but it's not something that you hear a lot. Is normally it's the other side where people are like, I've started too small. The demand's is crazy. I now have to quickly expand. You know what I mean? But these guys are now, I always thought it as a luxury, you know what I mean? Like to grow into, but it looks like they obviously started way too big too early, but they're starting to hit their strides now, they tell me, and I'm seeing their beers everywhere. So.
Excellent. They're good. I haven't interacted with them, but I've heard good things about them. And you obviously have both sides, right? As far as different experiences. And that's where it goes into planning for that growth, working with your budget on figuring out, this is what I start off with now. This is what my next stage is. And that's probably just going to be a cellar upgrade, honestly, you know, double brew tanks, triple brew tanks for your fast runners. Because I think one thing that people maybe don't realize is, let's say you have 6 beers in your range, 6 brands, but a lot of times, at least in my opinion, you'll have 2 brands that are probably doing 40% of your sales. So planning for that as well in your cellar with maybe double-sized brew length tanks, you know, I think that helps you grow into those big runners or those big sellers as well.
Yeah. Because there's so many different arrangements you can have with your brew house, isn't there? You know, starting out on my journey before I even thought about doing this podcast, you know, I started looking into all these different things, and I know that you've got some people that really market the whole save on your floor space. So they've got stacked systems like I know Julian from Spark Brew. They have a system, a patented system where, you know, it's all stacked up on each other to, you know, for the brew pub type model. It helps save on floor space. And I don't know if you know these guys over your way, the Brewha guys. Do you know Brewha equipment?
I have not heard of them.
I forget his name. But they have a really detailed website and some great videos, and they're very much targeted to the brew pub model. They are like do you know like a grain father?
Uh-huh.
And it's an all-in-one system where you brew in, you know, you got a malt pipe and all that.
You threw me off when you said your way, because I thought you meant in China, but they're in the US, correct?
Yes. Yeah, sorry, yes. Yeah. You know them?
No, I've heard of them because we put a system into Waco, Texas, you know, go Texas. But
right. Yeah.
I was recently there because I was actually stuck in the United States from February till last Friday because of COVID. But while I was visiting the client there, they mentioned that they brewed on that system, but I believe it was almost like an FV all-in-one brew house FV removable lid.
Yeah, you could pretty much, if your garage was tall enough, you could probably put a 10-barrel system in. they go right up to 10 barrels. And I thought, well, because I brew on an all-in-one system. I've got a Guten. I don't know what it's called over your way. They're called an Ace, a Hopcat, a Torrent, or whatever. Over here, you know, Kegland and Keg King, I think it's Kegland, they sell it as a Guten. So, and it's got a malt pipe in it. You can So, you've got temperature control, you've got some automation where you can set a recipe and you set your mash profile, you set your boil, and then when you disparge, you can lift the malt pipe out, let it sort of drain, and just use a kettle or HLT to sort of drain your mash. But they've taken that model and put it into a commercial sort of scale, and they can go anywhere from, I don't know what the smaller systems are, but they go 5, 7, and 10 barrel. But what I'm starting to see now after chats with Neil, and I'm sure you're of the same opinion, is you can't really maximize your efficiencies or your brew days. As soon as you move from your mash and into the boil, you can't have another one following because you're doing it all in the same system. You've got to do the whole 4 or 5 hours, however long it takes you for a brew day. It all goes into the same one. You can't have 1 or 2 more on the back end coming through, can you?
Exactly right. And that's where you're trying to, obviously make up time is money, and what I tell clients, and it's true. So the faster you can, push your beer out and get the brewer obviously away from the brew house to do other tasks, you increase your efficiencies. So again, I think it plays to, what location, what budget you're working with. One thing that the client in Texas did mention is obviously it was because it's all in one. It's a much cheaper solution, but there's trade-offs, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what I've taken away from it. And like you said, it really, once again, comes down to what you want to be. If you're happy with, if you've only got a small venue and you're only going to be putting out only a few hundred litres a month or 1,000 litres a month or something, maybe that model might be good for you, that system. But if you're wanting to do a good tap room where you're serving a lot more thirsty drinkers, you're going to need something else otherwise you're going to be there nearly all day trying to get to the same amount of volume, I guess.
Yeah, 100%, man. There's actually, we did a document, what I call a tank utilization calculator, which basically, you give it some variables on what you're trying to produce, how big is your brew length, and then it kind of calculates, how many FVs or how big of a cellar you should have. But it just kind of gives you an idea of, okay, if you got a 12 hec system and you're trying to do 120 hec a month, how many brews you're going to do, how many FVs is it going to take based off your cycle time? Is it lagers? Is it ales? I try to do that for clients to give them ideas. Hey, if you want to do this much volume, but you want to get a 500 liter system, you're going to be brewing quite a bit. And if you get a 2-vessel system and you need to do triples in one day, that's going to be a very long day. So again, they're all kind of intertwined and interconnected on driving that system size and configuration.
And just on what is a reasonable amount of brews in a week, and it obviously comes back to how much volume you need to get out and what, but most people listening are probably going to have a mate or two or a couple or a business partner or two. And there's going to be someone that ends up having to quit their job first off, and he'll draw a wage from it the first 12 months and he'll be doing the brewing, right? So we won't have much support there. The others will just come in when they can. But on that sort of scale, maybe the 500 litre system, maybe it's even 1,000 litre system. What is a reasonable amount of brews per day or even week? Like, I hear equipment suppliers ask me, how many brews a week do I want to do? And at this stage, I really don't know because I don't know what sort of volume I want to be putting out or, so what are some of the common ones? 3 brews a week, 5 brews a week? What are you sort of hearing these days?
I would say 3 to 5. Once you get over 5, you're brewing more probably than you want to during that 5-day work week, unless you're doing double brews. But then that comes down to what is your configuration. If you're doing a 2-vessel, let's say mash, lauter, kettle, whirlpool, you can probably do a double brew maybe in 8 or 9 hours, 9, 10, depending on the system. That's why it's very crucial. But once you go from double brew to triple brew one day, that's a big day. That's 12-hour day. And at that point, there's so much other stuff to do within the brewery, cleaning, transferring, packaging, cellar management, that if you're one person, I think once you cross that 3 to 4 brews a week personally, it can be quite challenging.
Yeah, I had Glenn from the Grifter out at Marrickville on in some earlier episodes, and he starting out, he said that they used to do 17-hour days, and they used to call it the campaign, emphasis the can. So it was a big day, and I'd hate to do that to my wife, especially with a newborn. So that'd be pretty heavy. But I know we were talking a bit about 2, 3, 4, 5 vessel setups and the pros and cons of it all. But are you able to talk to us? What are some of the top of the range type setups compared to, maybe the more better value for money, or, those on tight budgets, those probably, starting out, maybe they're looking at all areas to save money, but are you able to sort of list a couple of those sort of configurations for us?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so as far as the configurations, what I see and what I'm mainly selling is a 2-vessel mash slaughter combo, and then kettle whirlpool. That's either, the main heating, steam, direct fire, electric. Although there are now new alternatives that, we're doing. This might be food for thought and something to look into, but we're doing it's called a thermal liquid heated system. So basically it's a vessel that heats up almost like oil, if you will. Sounds a little scary, but steam is as well. But instead of going with steam into your jackets, you push it with this superheated thermal fluid that passes through the jackets and then goes back into its container, which is just getting heated by elements. And supposedly it can get pretty freaking hot. I'm being hotter than steam almost. Wow. So that's something we're working on for the UK. And I thought I'd mention it because I thought it was pretty interesting.
What are some of the, because you've got steam, you've got direct fire, you've got your boiler. What are some of the more commonly used type heating systems? I know Neil mentioned about electric being a little bit sort of how you're going, because it can have this caramelizing effect and burning, scorching effect. But what are some of the sort of, people that are heating systems that they tend to be using these days?
Most of our systems that we've put into Australia have gone steam. That's our preference. I think you get the most flexibility and the most efficiency out of steam heating. And then followed by direct fire. Direct fire, what you lose when you don't go steam, in my opinion, is you don't have the ability, especially if you have a mash slaughter, to put jackets on it. You can't obviously heat from the bottom a lauder ton, because under the false bottom is just going to get scorched. You have no way of moving that. Yeah. So my preference, in my opinion, is steam, direct fire, and then electric. What we've seen mainly in Australia in the kits we've put in is steam. We are currently working, I think, on 4 kits right now for Australia. They are all steam, with one being electric. So that is the preference. But be ready for a big installation budget for steam, because you need the boiler, which is regulated heavily. You need to get that steam piping put in, which is usually stainless. So it can be especially expensive, especially with the tradies. But you have the ability to basically do step infusion if you have a mash slaughter, where you lose that ability and you have to do single infusion if you have, let's say, direct fire or electric. And one thing I would say is, with electric elements, yes, you do get the scorching, but also with the whirlpool, I don't feel that you get the best whirlpool with elements in, let's say, a kettle whirlpool combination vessel. So the electric brew house we put into Deepwater, they had a separate whirlpool. You're also seeing a little bit more variety now of heating solutions. So I was talking about the thermal heating liquid solution that we're going to be working on in the UK. And then we also did one where there's a coil in the kettle and there's a burner hooked up to the coil. So it actually shoots the flame into the coil and comes out a flue at the top, which was a pretty interesting installation. And it's working well.
Yeah, it sounds like you'll get a lot more consistency there.
Yep. Agreed.
So what sort of advice would you offer to aspiring brewery owners when they're starting out sourcing their equipment? I know that you've offered advice already about, we were talking about location and knowing what concept you are, but, they've worked that all out. Now they're ready to talk to people like you, or they're ready to go over to China and start sourcing their equipment. What are some sort of big things that you would consider if you were doing it yourself?
talking to the manufacturer, whether it's us, any other manufacturer, understanding their capabilities and what they've done before, a little bit, research their street cred. That's what we try to. We're not a perfect company, but I think as far as for our clients, if we do have issues, we work hard to address those as best we can. But understanding how the manufacturer might work. I will say some manufacturers, they manufacture very well, but maybe they don't really know what they're manufacturing or exactly, what they can do to make it better or improve upon it, or to make it the best solution for the clients. So finding a manufacturer that doesn't just build, but also has the experience to kind of guide you in the direction that you're needing to go, especially if you don't come from this industry, or if you don't have the experience, especially commercially, to brew or to what goes in it besides just the equipment.
You probably get people calling you regularly about, in the early stages of starting their journey of building their brewery. What are some of the common mistakes that you see or commonly overlooked things by brewery owners when they're looking at purchasing their equipment?
I think it comes from the utility part of it, not understanding exactly your location, what's there, as far as ratings on electricity, how much power is coming in, how much juice you have, gas. I think one of the things as well is very important, your flooring.
Yes.
Understanding that your floor and how important that is to a brewery, that it maintains, it actually drains, you have good placement on your floor drains.
Yeah.
And even going further than that, I think for Australia, and you hit the nail on the head, as this industry grows in Australia, the eyes on it are going to be more and more, and they're going to be looking sharper and sharper. But wastewater treatment, I think, is a huge one in Australia that brewery owners need to really nip in the butt and understand, talk to, Sydney Water or Melbourne Water, and what exactly for that municipality they need to produce as far as reporting. Because I doubt you can just send anything down the drain these days. They want to know what it is, how much it is, what the pH, even what the temperature is. So I think that's a very important thing, especially in the Australian market.
There were some of the things I wanted to sort of rattle off for you about the physical premises considerations, and they're things that I'm starting to make note of is the weight of the floor. How much weight can it handle? The amount of cleaning chemicals and acids that are going to be hitting your floor. What sort of epoxy is going to be on the floor? And, or should it be epoxy? Should it be a brewer's tile? I don't know. Can you afford that? They seem to be sort of the, if you've got enough in your budget. Simon from the Rocks, he bangs on about brewer's tile. Wish he started out with it. Makes cleaning so much easier. Yeah, there's some definite important physical premises considerations and all that. And it seems to be just an obvious thing that if you're going to deal with overseas suppliers like China, make sure you put eyes on the factory and make sure you visit more than one. Just sort of put eyes, make sure that the quality of the weld and fabrication, the way it's being stored is just a professional outfit. Would you say that?
Yes, that's correct. And Neil, you had Neil Playfoot on here, and one of his services definitely, he can be the eyes on the ground, especially with COVID going on. So having that person or that security blanket even to be able to know that someone's there looking at with a trained eye on what exactly to look for. I think that's extremely important, because I don't think anyone's going to be coming into China anytime soon. Here I am 2 weeks in this hotel room because I came back, from the US. So that's definitely something to look at. And I think references are so important. I'm very open on who I work with, even the factories that I work with. And my clientele I consider friends of mine, and I'm very invested in their success, because their success, I think, is my success. So having that integrity, and getting that relationship started. One thing is obviously on a professional level, understanding what they can do and who they've worked with, but you also get that feeling in talking with them. Do they know what they're talking about? Do they seem real? Just getting that feel, obviously. I think a lot of people that comes down to it as well.
John, I remember, I think that's how I sort of came across you guys. You had a very interesting blog about brewery layout and what important considerations I guess a brewery should be thinking about when talking about where their equipment's going to go and where their tap room's going to go. The sort of services you offer, I think we're talking about design and architecture of an actual physical brewery. So someone has just gotten their lease on a factory or industrial unit, and there's nothing in it. It's blank canvas. They've got blueprints or some sort of designs that they can sort of send your way. I believe you've got a man on the ground over here. Who is that exactly?
Dave Bruff.
Dave, yes. So Dave would be able to come out and just assess it, and then you would work with that brewery owner about how it's all going to fit and maximizing footprint and, where the equipment's going to go.
Yes, we definitely do that. And because of COVID, we have set up and designed breweries based off of a CAD drawing and videos or pictures, and just an understanding. And I think one thing to think about when you're approaching that is there's always going to be a give and take, from the F and the B to the brewery. I want more space for seats because that's where we're going to make our money, but I need more space to make beer because we're selling the beer. So especially in a brew pub environment, we work very closely with not only the brewery team, but also the architects, the designers, and making sure that they understand what we need. Let's say if they come in with 300 square meters facility and they're only giving us 20, 30, 40 square meters, that's not going to cut it. Making sure that everyone understands what we need to happen and that there's going to be compromises on both sides, right? So what we like to do is we start off, as you said, with a layout, and we go in and we look for, do we have a certain place that we need? Do we have restrictions, in this place that you've set out, or is it a blank canvas? A lot of times in a brew pub, the architect has already said, yeah, I'm going to make this beautiful. There's the brewery. It's a square. Fair enough. We can work with that, because then you have to take in consideration. And what I like to do is just visualize the brewing process. And then that starts off with getting things in and out, right? Where is that? That can be the bottleneck of the brewery on trying to get the logistics of the flow. So we try to take that in consideration from the unloading and bringing equipment in, all the way to just imagining a brew day and the cellar and how everything flows together. And from there, we work with the team on basically playing Tetris, I call it, and putting things in different configurations and finding out what fits. And we become very good at bespoking a brewery. And I say that because that's our name, but we are very true to that name, meaning that, we can work with, we've got 1 meter of space to put FVs. Okay, well, let's make them an OD of 964, because that's what comes out to with the 80 mils of insulation and the outer stainless. And we're going to put that in. And whatever that does to the height, it does, because that's the restriction we're working under. So going from laying the equipment to think about utilities, to think about drainage as well, once that equipment is laid in, bringing all that together is a critical part of the brewing process, or starting a brewery.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have a clue when it comes to looking at an empty factory, and then I've got this piece of equipment waiting to get in there. Where do I put it? I think I would just put my trust in someone like yourself and just being able to work out the efficiency side. I'm quite prepared to pay the extra money if it means it's going to save me money down the track, and that's the theme I'm seeing. Obviously, it depends on if I've got in my budget, but it just seems like I've had many breweries on, like Glenn from The Grifter. He said one of the things he would have done differently starting out would be he would have set up their place differently. I think they sort of winged it a little bit themselves. They've got a great brewery and a great tap room. It's probably one of my favorites actually here in Sydney. But what he was saying is I would have probably set it up a little bit differently from what I now know. And I guess that's the beauty of engaging someone like yourself who has that foresight and that experience of working out where that should go and how to maximize floor space for both the tap room and the brewery.
For sure. And I think one thing to think about as well, if you're a business owner wanting to go into and start a brewery, is trying to get a brewer on board, or at least a consultant locally, Now Australia, I think we're well represented, but we've set up breweries in Japan, in Korea, in China, in Vietnam, in Chile, the U.S., and everything comes with its own little quirks, of what to look out for. Granted, it's all 95% the same, but definitely getting a brewer on board as you're planning, I think, is a very smart move, or your brewer who's going to be actually brewing there, because a happy brewer is a very good brewer.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been some great content there. And one thing I thought I might end up doing with having multiple people in this segment in the equipment sourcing space, we might be rehashing things, but
yep.
You've given some great complimentary advice of what Neil's given as well. And, I'm also expecting to have Julian on from Spark Brew as well. I'm sure he's going to offer some great advice as well. But love to get your industry insights. And the great thing is that, you're an international guest of the show and you've got great insights into different markets. You're saying you're well represented in Australia, so I'd love to hear your thoughts about the Australian market, but maybe even what's happening over in the US or what's happening in Asia or any other sort of emerging markets. We're talking about India as well, but I'm sure the audience would love to hear about that sort of stuff as well.
Okay. Well, I think as far as the Australian market, in my opinion, I love what's going on for local, support local. Seeing these, like we said, 5, 6, maybe 10 hec brew pubs popping up in the different, it's different with the US. We have a city, you have Melbourne, but you also have Collingwood, you have the Docklands, you have all these little areas that essentially you probably have the population to support a small brew pub, which is beautiful. And I feel that is going to continue in Australia and expand out into the more rural areas. And it's just going to continue to grow, in my opinion. So, and I see that all over. I see that in the U.S. We're quoting 7-barrel, 5-barrel, which would be 840 hec, 8.4 hec, and 6 hec systems. A lot of times, I'm seeing that in Korea. We did a 2 hec system, because they don't have the big locations. In Japan, we've done 3 hec and 3.6. Within China, 12 hec. So we don't really see a lot of big breweries going in recently, because I think people are trying to get more on-premise sales, really push the F&B and the getting those margins and really creating an atmosphere that people want to come in and just relax, enjoy a beer and get the food, which I think is going to, like the US, they're going to start scattering themselves, especially all over Australia. You see that more in India, although India, they're a little bit bigger, let's say, as far as location, but the brew houses are, typically 10 to 20 hec that I've seen, and even some 5 hec systems over there. So I do see that for the more established markets, you're going to see smaller brew pub type setups, because people want to get into an area, establish themselves as the local. I think Merrickville is really a very interesting area, because the amount of breweries that are there, it's amazing.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's like so concentrated. I don't know who was it. Pat from Willie the Boatman reckons it's one of the most concentrated places for craft beer in the world. I don't know if he's right there. Is that you reckon?
I haven't seen, maybe Asheville, maybe San Diego, some areas, the bigger cities in the United States, but yeah, it's insane. But as far as there's some big facilities there too, so that's what's impressive as well. But just seeing that type of I guess trend on my end from what I'm quoting and what I'm installing. I've got right now, I sent out a 6 hec. I've got 2 35 hecs in production. Got a 25 hec for the UK, another 1,000 hec, not 1,000 hec, 10 hec for the UK as well. So you're seeing that more smaller systems going in, which is really cool to see. But I will say the growing, like we put a brewery into Indonesia earlier this year. They're going to probably go with bigger breweries because there's so much opportunity in those areas. And Bali has a lot of Australians. I didn't realize. Yeah.
It's like the Poms. I love Mallorca and Benidorm, it's like all the Aussies like to go to Bali.
Exactly. Yeah. And Vietnam, I see a lot of growth in Vietnam and these developing countries. It's really cool to see.
Great. Beer trends. What are you starting to see emerge at the moment? We've had other guests on talk about, your hazies, your sours, even low alcohol or no alcohol seems to be a bit of a thing. But interested to hear your thoughts.
All the above on what you just mentioned. I do see some clients asking me about the ability to do other types of brewing. So maybe hard seltzer. That's a thing that I'm not gonna lie. When I was in the US, I did have a couple, and it was pretty good. They go down.
I actually don't mind them. I don't mind them
at all, mate.
It was Dan from the Australian. I had Dan from Australian Brewery on, and they just launched a new range when I was out there, and they're pretty tasty. And I can see, and not to sound like that's all females like to drink, but I can see there being an attraction there because females like a bit of a sweeter drop, and I can see them being brought into the industry that way, or at least trying out beers that way. It might be a gateway for them to try different things,
Exactly. And that's cool to see because especially with COVID going on, everyone had to pivot. A lot of people had to shut down in the US with their on-premise sales. So they had to go to packaging. They had to try different avenues to gain sales. So you're going to continue to see the trends start possibly in the US and Australia and the rest of the world kind of catching on. There might be a month or two delay, let's say, or even 3 to 4 months, but it also depends on the palate. You can't brew the same beers for Australians that you can, in my opinion, for Chinese or for Vietnamese. They're just not ready. Their palate's not there. So it's been interesting in the different countries that we have equipment or have worked in to see what the best sellers are. Lagers maybe in the developing world are probably better in the pale ales, where hazies and IPAs are more in the US and Australia and the UK because people are ready for that palate. We put a brewery into Germany. So it's cool to see that they're doing pale ales and IPAs as well. So it depends on what the market is ready for.
Yeah, Neil mentioned that Hefeweizen's like bestsellers over in China.
Yeah, we work a little bit with, as I said, ZX or ABI, and I believe it was last year they started brewing. Oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank. Their main Hefeweizen. They just started brewing it locally, and it's just selling so well. Because they like that oranginess, the fruitiness. They don't really, the Chinese palate, in my opinion, is not ready for pale ales or IPAs straight off the back because they're used to macro lagers. They're used to the Qingdaos of the world. Yeah. And you just you got to find, like you said, that gateway beer to start changing their palate in the right direction.
Yeah, interesting. I've never considered that, about, like palates in different countries. And I guess it just takes only a handful of people to start educating and people trying different things. Like when I started drinking, we only really had access to your Tui's New, your Carlton Drafts, your Super Dries, your 4Xs and all that. And people were just so brain dead to just flavorless lager. I mean, they're good quality beers, don't get me wrong. And listen, I ran out of beer the other day and I had some old Tui's New. I will admit I had one, and they're not that bad. Now I'm getting into this craft beer space. Jesus, you can tell the difference in quality.
Oh.
You might have the odd bad one. You won't touch it again. But like I was talking about earlier, those Colonial guys, they're making some great quality beers. Grifter, Wayward, all the guys I've had on, that's the reason I've had them on, is because they're producing some great beers and wanted to learn from them. So, it's interesting to hear about what's happening in China, India, and the US and all the different palates. I never really considered that, actually.
Oh, mate, it's a very culture-driven and cuisine-driven as well.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again, John. We're coming to the end, mate, and I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing us some insights about your brewing experience and what you guys do at Bespoke. Any closing thoughts and advice, just to maybe tie it off neatly for everyone?
I'll do a little anecdotal because when I started off in the industry, I honestly didn't know about craft beer. I came from an IT background, as I said, but the amount of support just from my clients on, let's build something. I have the access because I live in China, I speak Chinese, so I'm able to really kind of connect with the manufacturers and really kind of do some cool stuff, in my opinion, over here. But the support I was given, don't be afraid if you're getting in this industry to just do what you're doing, Chris, and asking people for their time, because this is such an amazing industry filled with amazing people that are always willing to help. Because I think that the thought process right now is, if we all help each other, it's just going to grow the industry more and more. And you're seeing it, and I'm seeing it from my clients, tank orders, expansion orders, that they are growing because the industry is growing as a whole. So to anyone looking to start out, don't be afraid to go ask for help and to ask for advice, because as long as you're not setting up right next door, well, maybe you are in Merrickville, they're probably going to be pretty okay with helping you.
Yeah.
For sure.
And a good little lead into when asking for advice and help, opportunity to plug your services. I know you've already talking about what you guys do, but tell us how people can reach you and how to best get in contact.
For sure, the website, bespokebrewing and then through social media, we've been really trying to push, content, a lot of blogs, to just get information out there. Whether or not it's the right answer, I think there's different right answers out there and different opinions, but just getting the information for people. Just please go look at it, comment, help us get better. And if you need help, you can just reach out to us via the website, www.bespokebrewing or via our social media channels. We're doing a lot of posts, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. If you see something you like, please comment, please give us a thumbs up. Please tell us what we might be doing wrong, or constructive criticism, because we're going to obviously absorb that and, put more information out.
Yeah, and I'll be making sure I link to your website, and if there's anything like brochures or ebooks that you guys might have, we'll try and make sure that they're available on our website, or but people will have a link to your website in the show notes if they want to reference it. So, well, thanks again, John. I really do appreciate your time coming on, mate. Everyone, that was John Gonzales from Bespoke Brewing Solutions. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Chris, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate what you're doing. I love it and want to support it more. So anytime you need me, I'm here to help.
Excellent. Thanks again, mate. Thanks for listening to the Build Me a Brewery podcast. That was part 2 of the brewery equipment sourcing segment. Part 3 of the segment, I chat with Julian Sanders from Spark Breweries and Distilleries, who are based in Melbourne, Victoria. As always, if you are liking the podcast so far and find the content useful, please give us a follow and rating on whatever platform you're listening on. Also, follow us on all our social media handles, as well as visiting our website, www.buildmeabrewery.com.au, and much more complimentary content will be coming your way if you sign up to our mailing list. I'm Chris Ayton, your host, and this is the Build Me a Brewery podcast.